Tate Chronicles now transmitting.
Welcome to the Tate Chronicles on Healthcare Now Radio. And now, here's your host, Jim Tate.
Good day, citizens of the free world, from border to border, coast to coast, and to all that ships at sea. I bring you a warm welcome. This is your correspondent, Jim Tate, and thank you for tuning in to the Tate Chronicles. Join me as we cut through the fog that exists at the leading edge of healthcare technology. I'm really pleased. My guest today is Drex DeFord, healthcare strategist and CIO at CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike offers services and products that support cybersecurity against numerous industries and domains. Drex brings a long history of healthcare informatics leadership and has held numerous CIO positions in the military, culminating as being the CTO for the Air Force Health Systems Worldwide Operations. Drex, welcome to the Tate Chronicles.
Yeah, thanks. It's nice to be here. My career extended long past the military too. I was the CIO at Scripps Health and Seattle Children's and Stewart, and so I have some white in my beard too, Jim.
Yeah, well, that's good. CrowdStrike is a sponsor for the upcoming Chime online event titled The State of Cybersecurity in Healthcare. It's a virtual summit on February the 8th. And I know the discussion that you're leading is titled Transforming Cybersecurity to Support Digital Health. Drex, I'm really glad to talk to you today because with your decades of frontline experience, you have seen the evolution of cyber risk over time. Give us a little sense of where you see the threat level is now compared to 10 years ago.
Compared to 10 years ago, I mean, it really is night and day, right? If you think about where we were 10 years ago, most organizations had just deployed their first electronic health record as part of the meaningful use program.
Right.
And then once that was done, everyone else in the health system wanted their bite at the technology apple. So in a short period of time, we fielded a lot of technology very quickly, usually without spending a lot of time thinking or overthinking cybersecurity. And then in 2016, Hollywood Hospital was hit with ransomware. That was really the first hospital to get hit with ransomware, and they paid the ransom. And then at that point, the gold rush was kind of on, right? We were a mission critical industry that had become very reliant on technology, and we had significant security challenges, and we had a demonstrated willingness now to pay the ransom when systems were down. And so, things are much different than they were even just 10 years ago.
Well, and just speaking of the ransomware, did that threat increase with the arrival of cryptocurrency?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, if you really sort of map this back to sort of 2009, when we really started meaningful use, 2009 is also the year that cryptocurrency was born. And so, unintentional consequences of, maybe meaningful use in cryptocurrency. Like I said, when we got to Hollywood Hospital, somebody crossed the streams, and that's really when we were off to the races. Yeah.
When we talk about cybersecurity, are we primarily referring to protection from bad actors, or are we talking about processes like strong passwords and backups and redundancies? What are we really talking about? Or is it all the above?
Yeah, it is all of that. I mean, I think in my head, it's people process technology, right? I often talk about how everything is connected to everything else, which sounds kind of dumb, but I think in our world, we see it over and over again. So, cybersecurity is the frontline staff, right? The lab and front desk and radiology and nursing and admin staff, all being part of the security team. But it's also, business continuity planning, figuring out how you're going to run should systems go offline. It's incident response. It's policies about everything from how do we acquire new systems and make sure that they're secure before we acquire them, to making sure with HR, the right people in our organization have the right access to systems that match their job needs and not more, to keeping infrastructure relatively modern, right? We have a real challenge in healthcare with tech debt. And so it certainly includes all those things, strong passwords, secure backups. Backups also is one of those things that is sometimes we find healthcare organizations are really great at doing backups, but they've never actually tried to restore from the backups. Mm-hmm. So it's like making sure all of those pieces and parts are in good shape, because eventually, you may very well face this situation of an adversary who's in your environment and doing damage, and you have to be able to deal with that. And all of these things are critical components of cybersecurity.
I would think one of the biggest nightmares for somebody who's working for a healthcare system, I hope it gives them sleepless nights, but the concept that one day at 9 a.m. during the week, a lot of surgery scheduled, and for whatever reason, the system goes down, and the only option is to go to paper. There obviously need to be fire drills of some type. I wonder if those what to do if a system goes down, if it's just in a 3-ring binder that's dusty on somebody's shelf somewhere. What comments or recommendations do you have around that? Because you had to be prepared for that. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I think, given my background in the military, a lot of what we did every day was, exercise, lots of different scenarios. Here's how we would react when that scenario occurs. These are things that we refer to commonly, on the civilian side as, business continuity planning. What do we do when the system goes offline? What if only part of it goes offline? Who gets to make the decision about when we disconnect from the internet? Or who gets to make the decision? How quickly do we need to make the decision when it comes to putting the emergency department on bypass and sending patients, diverting patients from our emergency department to other hospitals? And then how do we do the work to take care of patients and families who are in the hospital at this time, since we don't have access to our systems? How long can we take care of those patients, and when and who gets to make the call about when we start transferring patients out of the organization? How do you restore from backups? All of those things are incredibly important and definitely need to be practiced regularly. We see a lot of folks do tabletop exercises, but over time, it really needs to be exercised in a larger format with more business, clinical, and research operators involved, so that they can think through and not be panicked when the time comes, right? A lot of this is also just having perspective. We've done this in an exercise before. Everything's going to be okay. We know how to do this. We have stuff in binders that aren't dusty because we do practice regularly. All that kind of stuff is part of the business continuity planning.
And it's not only bad actors. We can talk more about that, but a system upgrade could be taking place in a hospital, and the pharmacy's EMR system goes down. And so there's got to be preparation for that, because that just happens even when there's no bad intention whatsoever.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, this is the business continuity conversation that doesn't have to do necessarily with cybersecurity. You're right. These things do happen on a regular basis. This is just technology, tech debt problems. Things break, and you don't have a replacement for that right away, or you have a planned upgrade and it went wrong, and now you have to figure out how to get back to where you were in the previous version of the application. All of those things can cause systems to go down. It feels more and more like the reason that systems go offline are tied to cybersecurity, especially when it's a long outage. But no matter why a system goes down, we definitely have become addicted to technology and have a hard time providing good, safe care for patients and families without that technology being available.
A thought just occurred to me. Obviously, around the banking system and monetary system in this country, there's certainly a lot of bad actors, but you don't hear about the technology going down too much. And maybe because there's so much money involved in it. How would you compare security around our financial system as to security around our healthcare system?
Yeah, it's interesting. Actually, you could use healthcare or a lot of other industries too, or a lot of other businesses too. healthcare is really interesting and special, and for a lot of different reasons. Again, having done this for 30 years as a CIO, there's a lot. We in many health systems, we love to buy lots of different kinds of applications. And so in some health system, it's almost like when you walk in and start really going through an inventory process, the health system may have purchased and are running one of like everything ever invented. On the infrastructure side, on the application side, on the analytics side of the house, they're super complicated. And there's a lot of reasons for that, up to and including things like medical equipment and, IoT, IoMT devices. When you compare that to the banking industry or other industries, you find a much, of course, it's hard to say that it's simple, but I would say it's simple in comparison to the number of systems that we run in healthcare and the tech debt that we often carry in healthcare. So simpler is always easier to secure. And so you find that, I think, in other industries, maybe an easier infrastructure and application suite of things to secure. And in healthcare, we struggle a bit. And we're in the middle right now of a lot of M&A. That certainly causes some new and interesting situations too. So yeah, it's just challenging. It's a different environment. I think it's a much more complicated environment to secure.
It is, and there's such a push for interoperability. And you start opening up all these APIs that require authentication, and there have to be a lot of gaps in there. I'm amazed that it seems like some of the bad actors, the attacks are such a low level. Somebody at a front desk could, if the system is open and connected to the internet, could receive an email, say, look at this video of this funny cat. And if they click on that, they've introduced who knows what kind of threat into the system. So it doesn't take a sophisticated nation state to launch an attack that can be very successful.
Yeah, for sure. We, certainly phishing is a big challenge, and I think most healthcare systems are doing a lot of work to educate frontline staff and test them on phishing scams. But a lot of the breaches that we see today are identity-based breaches. So maybe up to 80% of the breaches that we see start with an identity play, and that may very well be an adversary, a bad actor. And in healthcare, these usually aren't nation states. These usually are e-crime syndicates, right? They are going out to the dark web. They are buying username and passwords that have been downloaded from a breach at another organization. Unfortunately, end users, all of us our tendency is to kind of reuse passwords from one place to the next. They do some mapping to figure out that person works at this healthcare organization, and then they come in and try to use those credentials, and sometimes they're successful. So you wind up with an attacker who's in your network who looks like they should be there because they're using legitimate credentials, username and passwords. They look like somebody that works at your organization. And then from there, they start that effort at lateral movement and trying to find what they can gain access to. Can they elevate those privileges? Can they do other things? So a lot of this is also the internal hygiene of the organization and how they manage that identity, access, their Active Directory, those kinds of things.
Let me mention to our audience, if you're just joining this episode, I'm Jim Tate, and on this episode of the Tate Chronicles, I'm speaking with Drex DeFord of CrowdStrike, and the topic is cybersecurity. So the introduction of applications and data in the cloud, did that increase the risk to healthcare data when that became a big thing?
Yeah. I don't think just in and of itself, cloud doesn't have to be a soft target. In fact, I think you can make the argument that in some cases, having data in the cloud might actually be better or more protection than an organization who's running those applications in a tech debt ridden local data center. The big challenges we see in cloud attacks often are misconfigurations. So running operations in the cloud is a lot different than running operations in a local data center. Staff need to have new skills. They need new tools and platforms and services to be able to run cloud infrastructure and operations securely. And then certainly we get into the other version of the cloud too, right? Software as a service or third-party partners. So, for example, clinical or business applications that are hosted in the cloud and may include hosting your data in the cloud as part of that application. Mm-hmm. But those vendors, sometimes too, are hosting hundreds of other healthcare systems in that same environment. And because there's a lot of data concentrated in one spot, if the adversary can get into that third-party vendor system, they gain access to data from lots of different healthcare organizations all in one place, which, can cause a data breach for multiple healthcare systems, obviously. So, that version of the cloud conversation really is tied to third-party risk management programs that you need to make sure that you're up to speed and, again, talking regularly with your third parties about their security posture and the posture of all those partners who have access to your very important data, your patients and families' very important data.
Tell me a little bit about CrowdStrike, in particular CrowdStrike for healthcare. Who are your customers? What do you do for them?
Well, the customers kind of run a pretty broad gamut. We are at, I don't want to call anyone out by name. We're at some of the largest healthcare systems in the country, sure, and some of the smallest healthcare systems in the country. And really CrowdStrike does everything from endpoint detection and response, which means really helping organizations with capabilities like Falcon Complete to make sure that they are able to detect when something bad is happening in their network within a minute, within 10 minutes, do an investigation, confirm that there's something bad happening, within 60 minutes, kick the bad guy, out of the network. And so we do 11060. We use that as sort of our standard because in a lot of the research that we do on cybersecurity, we know that from the time a bad guy gets into your system and is on the first machine, in about an hour and 24 minutes, they will move from the first machine to the next machine. It takes them that long to break out of that first machine. Wow. And once they break out of that first machine, it creates a situation where you're much more likely than at that point to have ransomware deployed or to have data exfiltrated. So the game plan of what good looks like has to be to keep them from breaking out of that first machine. So that's what 11060 is about. Detect, investigate, and respond or remediate. If you can do that quickly, 24/7, 365, you're in a pretty good, position to be devastatingly effective against ransomware and data exfiltration.
That's fascinating. I've never heard that level of detail, but I guess you've been involved in so many of these and seen so many, you know what the patterns are and where the risk is. Do you typically, or do you offer system analysis to kind of like a security risk analysis to see where gaps may be?
Sure. From a services perspective, we certainly are known as an endpoint detection and response company, but we do lots of services and have lots of capabilities in our platform to do things like Active Directory assessments, to see things like, a lot of healthcare systems have service accounts, and the service accounts have never had the password changed or haven't had the password changed in 10 years. Those things, sometimes they don't even know that they exist because the Active Directory administrator has changed over time. And so these service accounts are just in there working. Sometimes there's a lot of people with elevated privileges that don't really need them. And so with an Active Directory assessment, you can actually see a lot of that information. And then we certainly have tools that help you run Active Directory more securely. But external attack, service management, mergers and acquisitions are a big thing right now. We have a team of folks who can come in and help you with analysis around M&A. Yeah, we're absolutely a services company, that's really powered by our platform and the the intel, the cybersecurity intelligence that really underpins the platform.
One thing I'd like to hear you comment on is, healthcare systems they are involved with so many supply chains, the risk to supply chains that maybe the healthcare system itself does not control the supply chain, but the supply chain affects them. You see supply chain attacks.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's sort of two versions of supply chain. There's certainly the software supply chain kind of attack where, again, this goes back to a little bit of some of what I was talking about earlier in that third-party risk management program. But third parties who may be delivering software to you or may be delivering software updates to you, the bad guy compromises that third-party company. And as a
Correct.
result, they're able to deliver these software bombs in a way that look completely normal to you. Yeah, we always take that update when they offer it. We take the update, we put it on our servers, and we go from there. And there are examples, certainly a lot of examples in the press about that. And then certainly the other part of the supply chain is the part I was talking about, where you're using other vendors to do software as a service, or in some cases other things that when that system goes down, it has a devastating effect on your organization because you need to make payroll, you need to get
Sure.
those supplies, whatever the case may be. So again, in the spirit of everything's connected to everything else, we think about cybersecurity for our own organization and how we protect our own organization. But the reality is, in healthcare, the supply chain for everything, supplies, being able to file claims, working with insurance companies, for research organizations or academic medical centers, being able to connect to other organizations like that to continue that side of the business. Everyone depends on everyone else. And so, you definitely have to put some time and effort into making sure, or helping to make sure, that you understand what the risks are that are associated with your partners. That's a big part, I think, of providing better, faster, cheaper, safer, easier to access care for patients and families. And that's really our mission in healthcare.
And I would imagine that as there's more technology and more threats to that technology, the security models have to be constantly upgraded, updated.
Yeah. We talk about it often as the old model of security really being focused on taller castle walls and deeper, wider moats to keep the bad guys out. And certainly that's something that still has significant importance. If you do that really well, you keep a lot of the lightweights out. But clearly adversaries are getting over the wall because they have significant skills and they're getting into the network. And so the new model of cybersecurity is really tied to this idea of speed. And I spoke of that a little bit earlier, but we know, like we talked about the hour and 24-minute threshold of breakout time. So the new model really is, how do you create a situation where you can always stay ahead of that breakout time? And that means, a good cyber program uses that 1-10-60 detect, investigate, remediate cycle. And I think if you can do that, that's part of what we talk about when we talk about cybersecurity transformation, is this idea that there's an old model of cybersecurity. There's a new, much more agile model of cybersecurity that turns out to be really important and challenging for a lot of organizations to make that transition, not the least of which is just, change is hard.
Drex, we're almost out of time, but before we say goodbye, how can our listeners find out more about the services offered by CrowdStrike? How do they get in touch? Yeah,
absolutely. We're easy to reach. You can certainly reach out to me directly. I'm at drex.deford@crowdstrike.com, but you can find out a lot about us by going to crowdstrike.com/healthcare. If you're a healthcare system that uses integrators or resellers to help you understand this market better or engage in this market more completely, talk to your resellers about us too. We work with many of the partners that almost every healthcare systems using to do their acquisitions.
Well, and I want to mention again, I did at the beginning, but I want to mention again that CrowdStrike is a sponsor of the upcoming Chime online event, which really is titled The State of Cybersecurity in Healthcare. It's a virtual summit, February the 8th. And Drex, I know you're leading one of those discussions. I'm looking forward to it myself. Attendees can register at the Chime website, chimecentral.org. And I want to thank our audience for joining me on this episode of the Tate Chronicles. And of course, a special salute to my guest today, Mr. Drex DeFord of CrowdStrike. Drex, thanks for coming aboard today.
Jim, thanks. It was a real pleasure, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you again.
You can find more information on this show's program page at healthcarenowradio.com. Until we meet again, here's wishing you smooth sailing and safe harbors.
Tate Chronicles transmission ending now.